Hello everyone, and welcome again to Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first, hazardous weather graphic starting down there in Bristol Bay. Winter weather advisory currently out, and will remain out until 9 p.m. This evening, or I'm sorry, until midnight this evening. And that's for total snowfall down in that area of 4 to 8 inches. And then about the same for the western Kenai Peninsula. Advisory level snow expected there, 4 to 8 inches or so. Actually 5 to 9 inches for the western Kenai Peninsula, and that's out for tonight into early tomorrow morning. Should end early tomorrow morning. And then the red areas there, winter storm warnings for heavy snow, or heavy snow warnings for Anchorage, Palmer, Manauskas, the Sitna Valley, Copper River Basin areas, and for the south central Alaska snowfall amounts looking for 7 to 14 inches to fall overnight tonight by tomorrow morning, maybe by mid-morning, and then tapering off. And then for the Copper River Basin, looking for 7 to 16 inches of snow falling there. And that winter storm warning there is out until 3 p.m. Thursday. And then in the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, winter storm warning out there as well. And that's out until, out for later tonight, tomorrow, or actually it's out currently for that area, and remains out through Wednesday night into early Thursday. And they're looking for possibly up to 9 inches of snow there, especially along the Alaska Highway. And from there, satellite imagery showing lots of clouds shifting, or actually flowing from southwest and northeast, but the whole pattern shifting northward there, the warm front. You can see the cloud shield advancing up toward the Yukon River there, the mid and high level clouds, and then areas of light snow across southern Alaska, rain or snow for the North Gulf Coast, and rainfall in the Panhandle. Main low center there back toward the eastern Aleutians, actually south of the eastern Aleutians. Then up in the Bering Strait, you can see a very weak system there, bringing some light snow to St. Lawrence Island, in through the Bering Strait and up along the northwest coast there, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, maybe Point Lacey, some light snow, and some snow showers far south as the Pribilofs, and rainfall amounts ranging from about an inch at Yakutat in the last 12 hours. Angoon had half an inch of rain, while wet snow fell at Cold Bay today. Otherwise, you can see snow pushing up across southern Alaska there with high pressure over the interior, keeping it mostly dry over the upper Yukon Valley and ridging down into the Yukon Delta to a little certain extent there. High pressure out over the western Bering Sea areas. And then that weak low in the Bering Strait bringing the light snow from the Bering Strait down to St. Lawrence Island. A few snow showers into the Pribilofs with the colder air. They're right around freezing both at St. Paul and St. George this afternoon. Mixture of rain or snow along the eastern Aleutians with snow with any elevation at all there. And then Cold Bay picked up several inches of heavy wet snow, temperatures in the mid-30s there with snow falling, kind of mixing with rain a little bit this afternoon. Then across Bristol Bay, snowfall there today, and you can see that trough right there where the warm front meets the cold front. That's a developing low that tonight will track northeastward into western Prince William Sound, give or take there, somewhere from, it'll track up along the southern Kenai Peninsula, may or may not track into the Prince William Sound area, but still winter storm warnings, moderate to heavy snow moving across south central Alaska and Kenai Peninsula into the Copper River Basin and northward there into the 40-mile country, extending back to about the Kuskokwim Valley. Clearing and colder up to the north, out to the west, things really quieting down there. And a warm front brings some rain and snow again, the eastern Aleutians, kind of right on the edge there. Mostly snow on the northwest side of that frontal boundary, and then rain along the front and to the southeast. Next storm pushing gale force winds and rain and snow into the western Aleutians there. And then for Thursday, that front really weakens considerably there out over the western Aleutians. Just some areas of light rain there east of Shimianatu, but staying west of Adak and Atka. Could see a little bit of light precipitation there from Atka Island. Mostly rain for the eastern Aleutians, warm front there, and mild southeasterly flow bringing warmer temperatures up with it into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, as the colder air holds over the central and northern Bering Sea. Very strong high pressure developing there near the Bering Strait. Maybe some flurries along the central Arctic coast, leftover flurries along the northwest coast, but nothing very significant at all, just resulting in some lower flying conditions, clearing over the northern interior, and then the snow ending from west to east and beginning to really taper off, especially in the afternoon. That system finally starts to pull off to the east a little bit there, now south of Cordova or so, and snow continuing through the day, eastern interior, Copper River Basin, and rain and snow over the northern panhandle, but dry to the south with maybe some clearing down toward Dixon Entrance. Then the outlook for Friday. It's very strong high pressure in over the central Brooks Range area. Maybe a few skiffs of flurry conditions and fog for the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, interior Alaska from the Arctic coast down to the Gulf. Dry Kodiak Island, mostly dry, maybe a few clouds. And Panhandle clearing out. That low tracks eastward and dissipates considerably with the snow lingering along the border through the afternoon there for the Panhandle, but definitely colder and gustier north winds coming in out of for the northern areas, Yukon or the Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay areas there. Look for gale force northerly winds, at least in gusts for that area for Friday, and also strong winds, colder temperatures, increasing winds and colder temperatures, Copper River Basin and Copper River Delta, channeled areas of Bristol Bay, Manuska Valley picking up those northeast winds with pretty chilly temperatures, but dry conditions. Fair amount of seeing some clearing skies over just about all of the interior. Mild southeast wind flow there spreads rain up to the Pribilof Islands. Temperatures well above freezing into the 40s there for the central eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at the lows for tonight, 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast and 10 to 15 Copper River Basin, falling below zero there west of the Alaska Range, but single numbers to lower teens for Bristol Bay, near 40 Kodiak Island, lower to mid-20s south central Alaska, but holding above freezing for Seward and Homer, Seldovia. And the highs tomorrow are really not rising much for that area. Mid-30s there for the southern Kenai Peninsula, mid-20s up toward Anchorage and the Manduska-Susitna Valley, mid-teens Copper River Basin, and shade below zero there, McGrath-Nikolai, right around zero, a little bit milder to the south. In the teens for the Bristol Bay zone, lower 40s Kodiak Island, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle, and right around 40 for Yakutat. Friday morning lows considerably colder there west of the Alaska Range, 10 to 25 below in the Kuskokwim Valley, dropping down to 0 to 10 for the Bristol Bay area, 31 Kodiak, 5 to 15 south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, 5 to 10 below for the Copper River Basin, and in the lower to mid-30s for the Panhandle, followed by highs, lower 40s for the southern southeast coast, lower 30s to the north, right around zero for the Copper River Basin, and 10 to 15 for south central Alaska, except near 28 for Homer and Seldovia, 36 for Kodiak, mid-teens there in Bristol Bay, staying below zero throughout the day for the Kuskokwim Valley. Up to the north, lows tonight, 25 to 35 below in the northeast interior. Otherwise, just about everywhere north of the Alaska Range below zero, except toward the Bering Strait. Highs tomorrow, staying below zero in northeast interior, north slope areas, right around zero for Ambler and Kotzebue, and 0 to 5 or 10 for the Arctic coast, followed by lows 35 below or so, 30 to 40 below, call it, for the area from Arctic Village into the Yukon Flats, and 15 to 20 below for the Tanana Valley and the central interior areas. Highs staying well below zero, most areas, and out to the west, 20s and lower 30s tonight for the lows, Aleutians, Pribilofs. Highs tomorrow, 31 for St. Paul, 30s to near 40 for the Aleutians, and then lows on Friday morning, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, 5 to 15 for the southwest coast, 30s for the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, staying above freezing there, followed by highs in the lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, right around 40 for the Pribilofs.
Aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather showing a lot of IFR, the system moving across the Kenai Peninsula there and southern Prince William Sound, with IFR northward there to and just north of the Alaska Range, moving pretty rapidly off to the east, and that extends down across all of the southeast coast. Kodiak Island, IFR, Alaska Peninsula, good VFR breaking out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and some IFR along the northwest coast down to the Bering Strait. Otherwise, VFR all the way up to the Arctic coast. And big area VFR there right off the coast of the Panhandle. Will that move in and produce a pretty much better flying conditions in the afternoon for Thursday? No. Stays IFR for the entire southeast coast and up along the eastern North Gulf Coast. Improving from west to east, though, but IFR holding on to the 40-mile country southward across the eastern Alaska Range into the Copper River Basin, but improving rapidly. You can see becoming VFR into the western Copper River Basin and Prince William Sound westward right out into the Bering Sea. Marginal VFR in St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait to the northwest coast, Noatak Valley, maybe the central Arctic coast. Otherwise, pretty good conditions, strong high pressure building in. And some marginal VFR, the weak system there over the western Aleutians. Friday morning, IFR pushing northwestward from a system south of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians there, with IFR along the southern coast of the Alaska Peninsula to Adak. Pretty good VFR interior Alaska, some scattered marginal VFR there over the upper Tanana Valley and also along the northwest coast, northern Seward Peninsula into around Kobuk. And IFR, maybe a small area there for the eastern Arctic coast, otherwise just scattered marginal. And IFR, most of the Panhandle, and then that becomes VFR. Friday afternoon, interior Alaska VFR, big area of IFR over the central Bering Sea covering the Pribilofs, and from about False Pass to the eastern Aleutians westward to Amchitka Island. And for passes, both Anatuvik and Adigan, good VFR for the day Thursday. Adigan VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill improving throughout the day, lowest conditions early on. IFR to marginal VFR, but rapidly becoming VFR throughout the day. And rainy, same pattern, improving rapidly throughout the day, starting out with the lowest conditions, VFR through the afternoon. Windy, IFR to marginal VFR. Still some improvement there, but a little bit slower. Isabel and Mentasta will stay IFR the entire day, take a little longer to improve over in that area. And moving to Tanita, IFR to start early on, VFR, call it late morning, maybe by noon on through the afternoon, some point in the afternoon. Portage, same thing, IFR to VFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR the entire day. Freezing levels at the surface there, just south of the Pribilof Islands, up along the Aleutian Range. Northward now, that system cutting eastward, nudging some warmer air northward there, along with the moisture and the snow. So at the surface, up to northern Prince William Sound and north of the Gulf Coast into the Coast Range there, and about 4,000 to 6,000 feet, or 2,000 to 6,000 feet across Kodiak Island, the Panhandle. Icing, again, areas of considerable moderate rime icing shifting eastward at a pretty good clip tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, bulk of the moisture in the southeast interior, North Gulf Coast, and then some more over the Alaska Peninsula. Next front way out west, bringing increasing icing threats there, but that won't make it too much farther to the east, most of that getting shunted off to the north. And for the jet stream, again, tomorrow, westerlies 100 to 125 knots, so that system's going to move quite rapidly from west to east and clearing out. Big ridge of high pressure building over the Bering Sea. Northwest winds 100 knots there along the northwest coast. 9,000 feet, upper level low there near the Yukon Flats, but westerlies 40 knots there along the Arctic coast, northwest 45, swinging around to the west 65 knots in the Gulf of Alaska, and 90 knots across the northern Panhandle. 3,000 feet, we've got some 50 knot east-southeast winds across the eastern Aleutians, and to just northwest of Unimak Island there. Southerlies at about 50 knots ahead of that next front, pushing into the far western Bering Sea. And 35 knot westerlies, and from there looking at turbulence with the gusty winds on the Arctic coast. Could be considerable moderate turbulence there, and also the western Alaska Range to Kamishak gap possibly that far south and along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. After the break, I'll be back with a marine forecast.
On March 11th, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. Miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the U.S. during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists use this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Sea ice analysis completed today, Wednesday. Looking the area there from the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea continuing to slowly narrow, and that's going to continue for the next few days with the easterly and northeasterly winds there, and the colder temperatures probably completely icing over in the not too distant future. And from there, looking at coastal water forecasts for the south coast of the Panhandle, west to southwest wind 15 knots, and for the north coast, south to southwest winds at 20 knots, southerlies at 20 knots with higher gusts for Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, southeast at 15, northwest at 15 for Clarence Strait. And for Friday, Clarence Strait, north winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Stevens Passage, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. And for the south coast, north to northwest winds 25 knots, northeast at 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast, seas as high as 14 feet. Prince William Sound on Thursday, southwest winds 25 knots, 6-foot seas, and for the North Gulf Coast, southwest winds 30 knots, 14-foot seas, west at 30 knots. Forecast for the Barren Islands on Thursday, Kamishak Bay, west winds 25 knots, and Southern Cook Inlet, southwest winds 20 knots with light variable winds for Northern Cook Inlet with 3 to 6-foot seas. Friday, Northern Cook Inlet, northeast at about 10, but small craft advisories for Southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, northeast winds 30 knots in those areas. Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, northeast winds 15 knots, seas 10 feet, northeast 25 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, northerlies at about 20 knots. Kodiak Island, west-southwest, 20 to 25 knots for Thursday. The Alaska Peninsula, northeast winds 30 knots, and Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, north winds at 25 knots. Moving ahead to Friday, for the Alaska Peninsula, east winds 30 knots. And for Bristol Bay, east winds also at 30 knots, seas at about 8 feet. Kodiak Island, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, with the seas running anywhere from 8 feet in Shelikof Strait to 11 feet along the Pacific. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, gale warnings, northeast winds 35 to 40 knots, with seas 16 to 20 feet. Central Aleutians, gale warnings also. Northeast winds up to 35 knots. And for the western Aleutians, gale warnings, southwest winds 45 knots with seas around 20 feet. For Friday, western Aleutians, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas down to about 12 feet, and east winds at 25 knots for the central Aleutians. And for the eastern Aleutians, gale warnings, east winds 30 to 35 knots with 12 to 19 foot seas. For the southwest coast, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the day Thursday. Pribilofs northeast at 30 knots, 11 foot seas. East 30 knots, St. Matthew Island, and St. Lawrence Island north at 15 with 6 foot seas. For Friday, gale warnings for St. Lawrence Island, the Yukon Delta coast, and the Pribilof Islands, all east 35 knots. East 40 knot gales for St. Matthew Island. Small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, east winds at 30 knots. Brisk wind advisories for Norton Sound for northeast winds at 25 knots. And for the Arctic coast tomorrow, west winds 25 knots. Northwest 25 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson to Wales. Small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots. And for the day Friday, from Wales to Cape Beaufort, east southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, west winds 15 knots for the western and central Arctic coast. Brisk wind advisories now for the eastern Arctic coast, west winds 25 to 30 knots. For tonight, low pressure tracking up across the southern Kenai Peninsula and toward Prince William Sound. With it, expect heavy snow. Winter storm warnings out for south central Alaska, Susitna Valley. Kenai Peninsula has a winter weather advisory for lighter amounts of snow there, but Copper River Basin and the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country also have winter storm warnings out for heavy snow. Look for precipitation to continue over the northern panhandle, but tend to end to the south. And for tomorrow, snow ends from west to east as drier, colder temperatures push in with that strong high pressure near the Bering Strait. And you see clear, cold conditions, very strong high pressure over the Brooks Range, and gusty, cold northeast winds across all of southern Alaska, especially the Copper River Delta and Lynn Canal.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.